everyone, and welcome back. Mindy here for Lawnfawn today, and I have a super cute Christmas card to share with you. This is going to be creating this fun window scene looking inside to the house, all decorated up for Christmas. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm creating a card base. So this is a white card base measuring 4¼ by 5½. And I also have a piece of wood grain cardstock, also cut to 4¼ by 5½. I want to create my window so it cuts through both of these pieces of cardstock. So I'm going to just layer these on top of each other and hold that down with some Post-it tape, and then line up my wonderful window die and also hold that down in place so it doesn't shift when I run it through my die cut machine. Then once that goes through, it's not going to cut through both pieces very well. The first one, it will cut through. The white piece of cardstock, it won't. And because it is two pieces, so two layers, it's going through, that stickiness from the Post-it tape really sticks to the card. So you want to be real careful when removing that. And I'm going to take care of that stickiness in a little bit. But once I remove my die cut pieces, I'm going to take the wonderful window die and place that on top of the white cardstock panel. It kind of fits right into place. You'll be able to feel it slide in. And then I can run that through the die cut machine again, and it'll cut it out perfectly. So my windows on both of these cardstock pieces will match up wonderfully. Next, I'm just taking the adhesive remover and just taking away that stickiness that the Post-it tape left. It didn't ruin my paper, it just was kind of sticky, and I didn't want my card to get stuck when I open and close it. So that eraser really helped. Now I'm just going to double check and everything is lining up, which is exactly what I want, so it'll show to the inside of the card. And one idea I had was, instead of just leaving that wide open, I'm actually going to add a piece of vellum behind there. I thought that really would give the look, the illusion of a window. So I'm using the lawnfawn vellum, and I cut that to the same size as my card base, the 4¼ by 5½. And I'm lining that up behind my window. And I also did cut the actual window piece from the white wood grain cardstock. Also on the wonderful window die is this windowsill, or planter, I guess, if you want to call it. I cut that out of some paper bag cardstock, and that's going to go on the front of my card. And I also have some pixie dust glitter cardstock here that I cut from the Puffy clouds border. I thought that just really looked like a billowy snowbank. So to make sure that I'm lining up my images where I want them in the inside of the card, I'm just tracing with a pencil that window piece. Next, I'm going to stamp a couple images from the Christmas Dream stamp set. I'm just going to use the Christmas tree and the fireplace. So I'm lining those up with my pencil mark so that they will partially show through that window. So I just line those up, and then I can go ahead and stamp these with the Lawnfawn Jet Black ink. This is Copic safe, so I can color it with my Copic markers. So I just ink that up, stamp that down, and my pencil lines are still there. It's not going to hurt anything. Once I finish double stamping, which is my personal preference, I'm going to come in with an eraser and just erase those lines. On a separate piece of white cardstock, I'm also going to stamp a few of the elves from the Holiday Helper stamp set. You could really use a lot of images from here to decorate your the inside of your card, but I was trying to keep it just a little simple. I didn't want to go overboard. So I'm lining those two little elves up in the middle of my cardstock, inking those up, and then I'm going to shift my cardstock up. That way I don't have to move the stamps on my MISTI door, or you could also use an acrylic block to stamp them too. Now I'm going to come in and just color up my images with the Copic markers. For the skin tones, I'm using E04, E11, and E00. I'm just going to color up one set of elves, and the other two I'm going to do off screen just to save a little bit of time. I'm going to try and keep my colors fairly simple, so I'm not using a lot of blends out of them. The green for the one elf is the YG17 and YG25, and I'm keeping the darkest area on the elves to their outside edges. So for the elf in the green outfit, the darker side is on the left side. And for my little girl with the reds, I'm using R39 as the darkest color and then blending out with R24. And her shadow area or darker side is going to be on the right-hand side. I wasn't sure exactly where they were going to go on the card just yet, but I like to have some dimension to them. So I just picked a side for them, and if it's not exactly where the shadow is supposed to be, that's perfectly okay. To me, as long as I have some depth and definition to it, that's all I'm really looking for. So for the hair, I kept this really simple. I have E29 and E25. And for the girl, I'm using E99 and YR24. I haven't colored blonde hair in a while, so I honestly just color pluck. When it comes to picking my Copic markers, I just reach for something that has some contrast to it and hope for the best. Moving on to the inside of the card, I'm coloring up the Christmas tree, and I did bring in another color for this since there is a little bit more of an area to color in. So I'm using YG67, YG17, and YG25. And I have the darkest color, so the YG67, more towards the top of each section of the tree. And then blending it out. And I do go over it twice just to make sure that that was a really nice, good blend. And like I've mentioned before in some of my other coloring, I do like to reuse colors that I already have in my card. So for the tree ornaments, I'm using my R24 and R39. And as for adding a shadow to the ornaments, it's literally just a seam mark. I don't even blend it out. I just add a little seam mark to one side of the ornament. And that's just enough to give it a little dimension and not look too flat. For the base, I'm also reusing some colors, so that's E25 and E29. And same for the mantle on the fireplace, the E25, and then adding a little bit of shadow with the E29. And just blended it out just a smidge. For my fireplace, I'm using YR15 and YR18, just dropping in some color. And now for the actual brick on my fireplace, I had started out actually with an R59, but it's dying. I really need to refill that marker. So I put that one aside and I grabbed an R89, which is quite a bit darker, and I'm just adding the shadow to the right-hand side of each brick and a little bit along the top. And I'll blend it out with an R56 and an R35. And when I'm going to use that R35, I actually go over the entire section of the brick. It just helps smooth all those colors together. And I honestly wasn't sure at first if this was going to work out or if I needed to blend some more or add in some more color. But once I let the Copic markers kind of settle and soak into the cardstock, I really was happy with how it turned out, so I didn't go back over it. And then for the back of the fireplace, I just have an N4 and an N6. Now I kind of felt like these images were hanging out, just floating around in the back of my card here. So I'm taking a Copic liner and my T-square ruler, and I'm drawing a line to kind of give the illusion of a floor. And I did add a little bit of shadow underneath the tree in the fireplace with a C1 or C2 marker. You can see I'm adding a little bit more. It just wasn't quite feeling right to me. And even with the line in there for the floor, to separate a floor and a wall, it wasn't quite right to me yet. So I'm bringing my T-square ruler back in, and I'm going to add another line so it looks like there's trim. Now, I really wanted to kind of go to town and make this a really huge scene, adding elements or coloring in the background, but I stopped myself. I was trying to keep this a little bit more simple. So I just added the trim. I added a little bit of color, an E30 and I think an E31. At this point, I was just kind of grabbing markers to fill in that area and feel better about the scene since there was so much open space. And I think that's what I was having a hard time with, was just leaving the open space. So once I was comfortable with this and I was happy with how it was looking, and it's peeking through my window just where I want it, I'm lining up my elves that I had die cut using the coordinating die and taking a look where they're going to peek through my window. Since I'm happy with those, I'll go ahead and attach those to the card. You could also add in lots of elements from the Holiday Helper set. You could have presents and toys under the tree, but like I said, I was really trying to rein myself in and not go too overboard, which is really easy to do with so many cute images on these stamp sets. Now I'm just kind of getting the card front put together. So I went ahead and I added the adhesive all around the edge. For my window, I'm using the lawnfawn glue. And what I'll do is I'm going to take my finger, you can see, and just kind of smear that around so nothing seeps out onto my vellum. And for the windowsill here on the outside, I kind of wished I would have waited to add that, and I'll show you why in a minute. But I did go ahead and add that, and I also added my snowbank to the front of the house. And you can see this is really shaping up into a super cute scene. So I'm adding that to my white card front base. And I did add a little bit too much adhesive, so I'm just taking that adhesive remover again and taking that off so my card doesn't get stuck together when I shut it. And that worked out really well. There was no stickiness left. And my windows open up and you can see I have that cute little holiday scene on the inside. Now I'm taking the new lawnfawn embossing pen, and I thought it would be really cute to add some of the textured embossing powder onto that windowsill that sits on the outside of the house. So it's just like a pen. I just applied that to the top of that windowsill, and this is where I wished I would have waited to add it, but it still works out really good. So I'm just sprinkling on that embossing powder, and it's sticking to that embossing pen ink really good. And I'm just shaking that off a little bit, and then I can come in and hit that with my heat tool. And with the textured embossing powder, it's not going to smooth out. That's why it's textured. What you're actually going to see is it's like little granules, so you can actually see the little granules of the embossing powder, and that's what it is, and it's really cool to see in person. I wanted to add a pop of color to the front of my card, so I'm going to stamp a sentiment using some chili pepper cardstock and the Simply Winter Sentiments stamp set. So I prepped my cardstock with an anti-static powder tool, stamped that with the clear embossing ink, and then I'm sprinkling on the textured embossing powder. I thought that just tied in nicely with the embossing powder I put on my windowsill. And I did have a little speck that stuck to it, so I just come in with a paintbrush and brush it away really careful. And I do have to clean up my messes as I go because it'll get all over the place. And then I can just heat that up with my heat tool. And like I said, it's not going to be real smooth like the regular white embossing powder. It's going to show like little granules, and I thought that just looked really cool. Now I'll go ahead and I'll just die cut that out using the Everyday Sentiments banner, and I'm going to just set that off on the side. I want to get a sentiment stamped on the inside of my card before I finish my front of the card. So I'm going to load this into the MISTI, open up my card to the inside, and I'm using another sentiment here from the Simply Winter Sentiments stamp set. And I'll center that in the bottom half of my card so there's still room to write a message. And I'm using the artichoke ink. And this is a really nice Christmas green. It can be for other holidays and seasons too, but I thought this just really tied in with my Christmas scene I had going on. Now to finish off the front of my card, I did go ahead and add some foam to the back of my banner. And I can add that to the top of the card, and I was really happy with how this red looks with that wood grain cardstock. So I had the neutrals kind of going on the front, and then I added that red, and I thought that just really looked nice. And I'm also adding my other set of elves, and I brought in a reindeer from Toboggan Together. I just thought that reindeer really tied in together well with the rest of the scene that I had for the front of the card. So I hope you enjoyed watching me create this little scene using the wonderful window die. and lots of Christmas stamp sets from Lawn Fawn. Thank you so much for stopping by, and I'll catch you next time.